It's back! It's back! Spontaneous painting. One of my favorite things to do. Apparently, a favorite among you viewers to watch. And a little bit of a twist today. We're going to use 3 colors that I've never used in a painting before. At least you've never seen me use these. I think I've fiddled with them maybe to swatch a little or something. I don't know. And the results were pretty interesting too. In a good way. So, let's go get spontaneous. You're excited, I can tell. That's his excited face. Well, all right, let's do something spontaneous. One of the things I like to do is just pull out stuff I don't use very often. I've got 3 colors here, and I want to do a spontaneous painting with these 3 colors. These kind of sit in my drawer. They're not on a palette. This is all M gram, and I've got cobalt teal here, transparent yellow iron oxide. They have a red iron oxide, an orange iron oxide, and a yellow iron oxide. To be honest with you, this in the past has not impressed me very much. It's a little kind of a muddy, dirty looking color, but we're going to see what we can do with it. And then there is mineral violet. Now, the only thing I'll be adding to these possibly will be neutral tint. All right, I'm not going to do my painting here. This is just a little sketchbook that I use for swatching and some little thumbnails and various and sundry other things. So I'm just going to do a little kind of a color wheel. I like to just kind of get the colors out and kind of pull them together. Let's get these colors mingling and see what we can see. Makes a pretty interesting green with the cobalt turquoise. With all 3 there, you got a nice gray going in there. One of the things, I did have mineral violet on a palette years ago. It's been sitting around in my drawer ever since, but one of the things about it is it's a weak purple. It's one of the reasons I stopped using it. Mineral violet is a little bit more magenta-ish. Dioxazine purple is just, to me, more useful. It's much stronger. These do some interesting things together, though. Some pretty interesting greens there, as you might expect with something so umberish, very earthy green. Let's see what we get with these 2 alone. There's a sort of a milkiness to cobalt teal, but that's pretty. It makes a nice purple, bluer, sort of blue purple. Cobalt teal is probably something best used sparingly. It's pretty powerful. And I just made the peace symbol. All right, so I'm going to be using a Kilimanjaro block, the original bright white, which is nice as a 9x12 block, cold press. And I got my 3 color palette here. I've got this palette out, but I won't be using any of these colors. I just want a bigger mixing area, and so I can bring in the neutral tint. All right, well, for spontaneous painting, for me, it's about trying things. I rarely am out to make a painting. You know, I mean, I have some that have turned out nice and make nice paintings, and that's fine. It's always a bonus. But that's not what it's about. For me, it's trying things, it's trying techniques. I recently reviewed the Schmincke masking fluid, so I'm going to spontaneously spatter some in before I lay down the initial washes. No rhyme or reason to it. We're just going to see what happens. I like the fact that this is probably going to be pretty easy to spatter. I'm going to use this cheap brush, but as I found out in my review, this stuff washes out of a brush with soap and water. That was huge for me. And just remember, when you use spatter, especially if you use it spontaneously, if it's something you don't want to be white, it doesn't have to be. You can fill it in with color later. Maybe these will be rocks. I don't know. We'll see what they are. I'll create a center of interest here. All right, I think that's going to be enough. We're going to let that be, let it dry, and I am going to go wash this brush out. All right, the mask is dry. I'm going to start mainly with spatter spray. I'm not going to completely wet the paper. It's just going to be spatters, and we'll see what happens. I'm mainly going to use the yellow iron oxide and the mineral violet. Get some of that cobalt turquoise in there, but I don't want to overdo that because it's so overpowering. And this is what I'm trying to do, is get this to creep like that. That's why I'm using spray. If you do this, have a paper towel ready so you can just get that corner in there and get it up. Because I had the yellow and violet on my brush. They're all kind of neutralizing each other out. I'm going to have some paint just go right off the top. It's a nice color where the violet mixes with the yellow iron oxide. I like it. Got the creep over there. A little bit more. Looks almost like roots, doesn't it? I'm using a Princeton Neptune Oval Wash 3/4 inch. It's a great first wash brush. I use them a lot for first wash just because of that point, and then you can go right up to a wide wash if you need to. Great for spontaneous paintings or laying in these kind of backgrounds. And then you can also kind of pull some of it together if you don't want it to be quite so fractal looking. It's really turning out to be a more interesting color scheme than I thought. These, at first blush, these colors don't look like they're gonna get along all that great, or do anything spectacular, but I think it's pretty nice. Before I let this dry, I'm just gonna come over here with a light, very pale tree line. Back there. Hit it with a little more actual turquoise, or teal, excuse me. The other two colors mixed in is just making a really nice gray. All right, cool. I'm going to let this dry and we will come back to it. All right, I think we're pretty dry. Before I do any more, I'm going to go ahead and lift this mask. I think that any more layers I put on that, I'm wanting those to probably be painted. Now, one thing about mask, and this is true of any mask, I've noticed that, especially on this, you have to be careful of paint that beads up or dries on top of the mask, especially if you use your finger, because what's going to happen sometimes is that paint may be damp and you don't know it, or even though it's dry, it might smears. A lot of times after I do a wet wash on top of something like this, I'll go and find the big sort of droplets and kind of pick them up with the corner of a paper towel. And then I'll check it again before I lift the mask. And I want to make sure I'm not smearing paint from the mask onto the painting. Just a little tip for you. Looking better even than I expected. And the colors are just combining in very interesting ways. Plus, there's a lot of granulation going on here, a lot. in the yellow iron oxide and the mineral violet. Look at those tiny little rivulets. There's some right up in here. I mean, this is what is meant when you say, you know, a watercolor can paint itself. I'm just feeling to see if there's any more mask. You can usually feel it pretty easily. I'm getting some nice neutralization in here. I mean, this is a nice sort of a olive green, and I have not used any neutral tint yet. What I'm going to do now is we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to spatter spray and then start dabbing in here, and we're going to cover up some of those white areas. I just always get so excited when I see watercolor paint so much of this for me. I mean, it's just, you never know how it's going to go. And I've had some of these that didn't go that well. So far, this is just little spatters and the creeping washes. It's just done some really interesting things. And what you want to look for, and I have this question asked every single time I do spontaneous paintings. How do you see? What do you see? What's the process you go through to find the images or whatever it is that you paint to make this look like a scene? And honestly, I don't look for anything except edges of contrast and shapes that are forming. And the extent to which, you know, the spontaneity has worked really well or kind of well or not so well is whether or not it presents me with some of those shapes. Now, the other thing is, whatever your chosen subject is, you need to be familiar with it. I mean, I would be lying if I told you that this is an automatic painting process. If you follow this process, you're just going to automatically do great landscapes. That's just not true. And the thing is I've been painting landscapes for 40 years plus. So tree, ground, foliage, you know, ground structures, tree structures, all of that stuff I've sketched and painted for years. And so I have a visual library, and that's what you need to work towards. And that's just filling sketchbooks. And the more you do that, the more you're going to see when you do this kind of a thing. So while this seems like magic, it really isn't. There can be magical aspects to it, and watercolor will do some things for you that you didn't expect, and that will feel magical at times. But coming out with a great painting when you're done is not magic. All right, for this second layer, I am going to let that dry. And I think then we'll be ready to detail and turn this into something that looks a little more realistic. All right, so we have a totally dry surface here, and I'm just really excited about this. This is probably one of the better bases I've ever had to paint on from spontaneous painting. A lot of great rocky texture here, which all I have to do is enhance a little bit. I have some clear, because of the mask, I have some clear contrasting edges. Now, what I usually do next, and I've already been doing this to a degree, once I have the base washes painted and I have something I feel like I can detail on top of, I look at it for a long time. Now, again, in answer to the question I always get, how do I see? What do I see? I don't see it. I don't see a scene yet. I see possibilities. And what I do is I just take the next step and see what happens. I can increase the contrast there and maybe add and define some edges, and that'll be a bush. Okay, I have several shapes here that might make rocks. You're going to be darkening things. So what you're doing is you're leaving lighter edges and pulling darker edges down.
Wasn't hard to tell that your eyes were following me. It was like we were under a spell, and anyone could see. We had to say goodbye before we had a chance to see what we held in our hands, what it could have been. You almost missed your flight. I'm not even gonna pretend I didn't try to slow you down, to postpone the end. Hey, you sent me a text saying wish things were differently, but I'm already with someone. As for my sympathy, feeling you feel.
All right, well, for the time being, we're going to call that done. And I am pretty happy with that. Once again, this color scheme just surprised me in so many ways. I like the little white sparkles that the mask created. And then it also gave me a little more white or light areas for contrast. So it just really set up this whole area of rocky texture. What I think is cool about that is this looks like a broken down, sort of an ancient broken down wall. And that's just amazing to me. That's just, it emerged as a total surprise that would have come out of this. But it's just, seeing what shapes are there, playing with them, bringing them out, then seeing how that links up with other ones. That's what's so fun. So just a really enjoyable painting time. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, patrons, for supporting this channel monetarily. You are making it happen, and we will see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.